Then on to our first keynote for this morning. Mike Webster is the program manager for the 2030 Water Resources Group. He leads the group's mission to help governments, companies, and civil society address water risks impacting food, cities, and ecosystems. His role supports the World Bank's growing emphasis on partnering with the private sector and to advance water security. Before he joined the group, he was the executive director of the Water and Sanitation Directorate right here in the city of Cape Town, where he led the city's response to the 2015-2017 drought by implementing a comprehensive water security strategy. And I'll have you know that he still has a home base here and visits Cape Town regularly enough. Prior to that role, he worked for the World Bank for 16 years as a water and sanitation specialist based in Washington, D.C., in New Delhi, and Harare. He's going to speak to why commercially viable utilities are key to improving water security in Africa. A round of applause, please, for Mike Webster.
Greetings, everyone. Can you hear me on this microphone? Is it working okay? So wonderful to be here among so many friends and former colleagues. As Africa says, I do come to Cape Town every now and again, but when Sia and Henny and Amir asked to come, I said, I'll come to Cape Town if you can get your first smart meter in the ground by the time of this conference. And Henny in particular assured me, yeah, that's possible and it's going to happen. I'm afraid to report it hasn't happened. But I am here, but Henny assures me by next month, by April, the first smart meter will go in, and within 14 months or 15 months, there should be 100,000 meters, smart meters in the ground, which is really quite an achievement. Well, let's get there once it's an achievement, but it's something that's been a long time coming and was very much under gestation in the time that I was here. So as Africa said, my name is Mike. For those who are not familiar with me, I'm from South Africa. This is my hometown. I did work for the World Bank for some time. I came back and worked in the city with a fantastic team, many whom are here. And then I've gone back to the bank to work for this 2030 Water Resources Group. I did want to just start by asking how many of you are engineers or technicians or from a technical background? If you put your hands up. So I think it's by far the majority, as far as I can see. How many from a finance background? So part of the reason I actually decided to go with this topic, and this is really not my topic. I'm an engineer. I'm looking at Barry. You know, he's the consummate engineer. Barry's the reason we got through day zero, by the way, apart from anyone else in this room. And you need that engineering competence. But what this presentation is trying to highlight is the bigger issues and the things that actually are going to affect water security and this Africa's ability to shower for longer than 2 minutes are generally at the finance and the commercial stage. And I wanted to, from my perspective from the World Bank, give you a sense of what that looks like. I am going to make apologies to the finance people in the room because it's really not my core expertise and I might get some of those things wrong. But I think for this technical audience, it's actually a very important perspective. Before jumping into it, I also want to just introduce two colleagues. First is Lubabalo Loyabu, who I think many of you know. He's my colleague based in Pretoria, and he's leading the WRG, the 2030 Water Resources Group program in South Africa. And then I want to introduce Joseph Mugabe. Joseph, can you stand up, please? So Joseph is the new manager for water for the World Bank for South Africa and the regions, the countries up to Ethiopia, DRC, Angola, and below. It's about 16 countries. He's just moved to Pretoria a month ago. This is his first visit in Cape Town, which I'm shocked at. He's from Uganda, he's worked in Kenya, he's worked in Malawi, he's never been to South Africa, and he's never been to Cape Town. So I hope you can find him, at the breaks and bend his ear about, where you fit into this picture. Okay, why commercially viable utilities are key to improving water security in Africa. That sounds like a lot of jargon. Sounds a little bold, but let me take you through it. So I've got 6 messages. First is African cities face large and increasing capital investment needs for water and sanitation. Second is public spending is wholly inadequate in relation to the need, and the use of commercial finance has been tiny. Third is then how to fill this gap between this infrastructure need and the financing that's available. Fourth is successful utilities make use of loan, concessional, and commercial finance as part of their financing strategy, and this has often not been the case, but I want to show you a path towards that. Fifth, accessing loans require a utility to be financially viable and creditworthy. And lastly, provide you some tools and some examples from around Africa, around Latin America, around Asia, on how to increase your levels of investment through accessing commercial finance. So message 1, African cities face large and increasing capital investment needs for water and sanitation. Henny mentioned that from a global risk perspective, water is number 4. We have a very low infrastructure base. You're seeing it in places like Johannesburg. You're seeing it all around the world. This is underinvestment over decades, and that's very difficult to dig your way out of. We often used to say in Cape Town that water is the next Eskom. We were all very aware of how the energy sector in South Africa had been run down with underinvestment in both generation, transmission, and distribution. Water is in that same position, and those outages you're seeing, or those water shortages in Joburg and that we felt in Cape Town, were a direct result of that. Huge growth in the sector, huge growth in the continent. The demand for water in Africa is supposed to triple over the next 30 years. That is phenomenal with a situation where we're currently not meeting our current demand. And the new water agenda, as we know very well in Cape Town, is to look at resilience beyond your regular means, drought, floods, and be creative in the supply and the demand options that you have. Message 2, public spending is wholly inadequate in relation to this investment need, and the use of commercial finance has been tiny. There's many different figures you see. These are from a World Bank report called Funding a Water Secure Future, which is based on a global public expenditure review from a few years back. But it estimated that about $1 trillion globally was needed to meet basic water needs through sustainable development goals or other metrics. And current spending is around $164 billion, a sixth of what is needed. Of that $164 billion, 86% is from the public sector, and a tiny bit, 2% from private sector financing. And it's really that 2% that we are saying is key to addressing a lot of this investment gap. So how to fill it? 4 pathways, and one of the takeaways is that all 4 are needed to really make a dent. The first is increase the public spending and make it work harder. The average spending across the globe for water and sanitation by governments is around 0.3%. You compare that to other sectors like electricity, closer to 3-4%, transport in the same kind of range. There's a compelling case to be made on the jobs agenda, on the growth agenda, on public health, on investment for increasing public sector spending for water. But also make that work harder. In other words, use soft money to raise harder finance that can provide a much bigger pipeline for investment in the sector. The second and probably the most important takeaway from this is increase revenue from tariffs to fund O&M, direct investments and loans. Increase efficiencies, and I think that's most of us in this room probably work in that third category. If I think about metering, a core intention of the metering is to improve efficiency of revenue. I think if meters after 8 years, after 10 years start to underread, a big reason to change out the meters in the city of Cape Town now and put in these smart meters is not just because of all of the cool things the smart meters can do, but is you getting systematic underreading from those old meters. Non-revenue water, on so many figures on non-revenue water that from various parts of the world. increasing your efficiency of OPEX spending, your energy costs, your staff costs, and of course your capital program. And then the fourth, which is really the topic of this, making more use of commercial finance. Successful utilities make use of loan, which means concessional and commercial finance, as part of their financing strategy. And I'm not going to go through all of those examples, but you can look them up. I'll make these slides available. And just to give you a little bit of a feel for it, Sabesp in Sao Paulo, the second largest water utility in the world. I'll come to some facts and figures about Sabesp afterwards. EPM, the Medellin utility in Colombia, it does energy and water. Actually, we used that as one of our comparator utilities in the city of Cape Town. Our water strategy was based on inspiration from Singapore Public Utilities Board, EPM in Colombia, and other utilities around the world. Phnom Penh in Cambodia, this major turnaround, and I'll provide some facts and figures on that. Tanga, UWASA in Tanzania, issued a green bond. Uganda National Water and Sewage Corporation, Justice's original employer, and can tell you more about that, but also issued commercial financing, which is one of the firsts in Africa. Message 5, accessing loan requires a utility to be financially viable and creditworthy. And this is really the exception in South Africa and globally. Financial viability means that your operating cost ratio is over 1.3 to 2. It means that your revenues are more than sufficient than your costs, so that a commercial lender can get their money back. Creditworthy means that the distance to default, the likelihood of the commercial lender experiencing a default from the borrower is far enough for them to have confidence that the utility is creditworthy. And there are various de-risking tools out there. The World Bank does some of this de-risking through MIGA, multilateral investment guarantee agencies, and other facilities. Commercial banks do as well. And lastly, there's a range of tools out there to support utilities to create levels of investment through accessing commercial financing, and these are just 5 examples. Henny gave some feel for these as well. These are from a report by SECO on lessons from successful utility reform. Governance is often at the heart of it. Joss has asked me last night, what's the key to Cape Town success compared to some of the other utilities in the country? And my first response was it was a governance one. You have a city manager who's absolutely focused on good governance. You have a CFO that's diligently looking at the books. You have a council that has been educated into knowing that having revenue for the utility is essential to moving forward. And I know for some of my colleagues here, that's a little bit of a surprising message because that hasn't been an easy relationship. But you compare that to other municipalities and you realize that the governance factors are probably primary. Management effectiveness, clearly a key part of it. Revenue sufficiency, which is at the heart of this. Financial and performance transparency, peer group comparators. I'm just going to run through a few examples before concluding. So the city of Cape Town, where we are now, beyond the drought, beyond getting through the drought and the real challenge that was, to me, one of the biggest successes of that whole era was that we were able to increase the revenue base by 20% coming out of the drought and putting us on a much more stable footing. So that graph shows you collection rate from 2017, and if you went back to 2010, you would see a declining collection rate down to about 70% around the period of the drought. That means the portion of your bills that you were collecting was around 70%. This massive turnaround program we did coming out of the drought and focusing in on revenue had this major turnaround. And that revenue focus, which was led by Sia and by others in the team, was around directly looking at debt management, getting the tariffs right, customer relations, and diligently focusing on turning that around over about an 18-month period. and it provided this 20% revenue increase. That revenue increase financed a 4 times increase in our capital budget. We went from about a 2 billion rand budget, which had been that way for years, to an 8 billion rand budget in 2026. I think it might have come down to more like a 6 billion over time, as that was a little bit unaffordable, but a 4-fold increase in capital budget. You compare that to any of the other metros in South Africa, they're all under 1 billion. You compare that to other municipalities across the continent, and this is what's driving that investment in operation and maintenance to create those services which are needed, and this is at the heart of it. So I think the commercial services department and that ability to focus on revenue and efficiencies is at the heart of the story. Phnom Penh, Cambodia, very dramatic turnaround of that utility. Similarly, major increases in cash collection, 50% to 95%, increase in billing, increase in revenue, increase in operating cost coverage. I said you needed between 1.3 and 2. This went from 0.66 to 1.7, and that had major improvement in services. Production increasing by 4%, hours per day to 24 hours. Non-revenue water is probably the most startling from Phnom Penh. They went from over 70% non-revenue water in around the 80s down to under 7% in the early 2000s, and they've maintained that over time. Big expansion in the network from this capital program and big increase in their customer base. Indonesia, National Urban Water and Sanitation Program. Indonesia is a big country, 280 million people, about 500 municipalities. This is a program that has different tiers of central government financing to different levels of creditworthiness of their municipalities. So at the lowest tier, the Group 5, which have the least amount of revenue, they get a seed grant to increase their service coverage and performance. And all of that is underlaid by a technical assistance and capacity building program. The Group 4, that have a bit more revenue, have a performance-based grant that matches that central government grant. Group 3 introduces this matching grant for non-public financing, for this private financing sector. And then the first group, cities like Jakarta and the bigger cities, only get matching grants for commercial financing that the city themselves are responsible for raising. Senegal, one of what we believe is the big success stories in sector reform across the continent. Diverse, large water sector, made very creative use of public, private, and guarantee instruments. And this is relevant mostly to the World Bank Group's financing. A lot of acronyms in there. I'm sure you can't understand most of them, but the first one, just the treatment plant gets financing from IBRD. It gets IFC, our private sector arm, technical assistance. It also gets IFC debt, and MIGA, this multilateral investment guarantee agency's political risk insurance. The desal plant also has World Bank financing, IFC financing, MIGA, and similarly for the water treatment plant and for the non-revenue water program. Uganda, National Water and Sewage Corporation, $40 million US raised from domestic banks. You know, for years, they used to get concessional finance from various donors and from the government. It is very impressive in its performance. It's expanded to beyond the capital to 270 towns. But they took it on themselves to move away from donor financing and to tap commercial financing as the most sustainable long-term financing options. So over a period of 10, 15 years, and I'm sure Joseph can tell you more details, they got to the point where the National Water and Sewage Corporation themselves raised 40 million from local commercial banks. And lastly, Brazil, Sabesp, which I think is the most significant, and particularly for a South African context, in its scale and in what it's done over the last decades. Sabesp is the utility of Sao Paulo State, which is the Sao Paulo city and surrounding 300 municipalities. It's the second largest across the globe, developing country utilities in the world in terms of gross revenue. It's absolutely massive, 28 million customers, 10,000 employees, and you can see the coverage figures below. They've evolved since the 70s from the state-run utility to getting in more and more private financing until 2024. They actually listed on the New York Stock Exchange and now are a private company entirely. There's many factors to it, and I won't do it justice to really go into the whole history, but a key part of it was in this mobilizing of capital from the private sector. There was this massive investment jump, doubling the investment amount in the mid-2000s that has put them on this sustainable path and allowed them to expand their sanitation coverage in particular. So in closing, just to recap those 6 messages that I mentioned in the beginning, African cities face large and increasing capital investment needs. Public sector is wholly inadequate, and the need for private sector is paramount. How do you fill that gap? Successful utilities make use of this concessional and commercial financing as part of their financing strategy, together with other efficiency measures. Accessing loans requires a utility to be financially viable and creditworthy, and I've gone through some of the tools to support utilities to increase these levels of investment. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the next couple of days being with you. Thank you.
You should never undersell yourself. You might be an engineer, but you do the financing thing very, very well. I think you've made a good business case as to why the private sector should look to be more involved in the solutions of water.